What's up, guys? Just got done recording a fantastic episode with David Glinsky and Robby. Robby talks a little bit about some quitclaim deed nonsense happening up in Ohio, reclaiming some taxes, some BK, whatnot. I interview David about how he's planning to grow his note investing business, which is going to be very important for anybody who's just getting started or looking for new strategies to grow their business. We talk about a bunch of other stuff on this week's episode of the Note MBA podcast. Check it out right now.
Read the law and follow the law. That's what they're supposed to do. In the case of this one, that's exactly what's going on. It's a little bit of a headache. It costs more money. It takes more time. But I think we've talked about this enough times to know.
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out notemba.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
Alrighty, guys. Well, welcome to the Note MBA podcast in our newest form with me coming here in to open the show, Mr. Woods. Chase is going to do a little interview this week, and he is interviewing Mr. Glinsky. So the adjustment we're going to make with the show where we talked about going back to bringing an investor who is new to the note space is something that I think is going to bring a lot more material to some of our newer investors. And they'll be able to piggyback on top of the deals that I'm going to be out more actively doing so that I can just kind of bring stories that Chase is going to figure out how to dot his interviews with so that they follow along correctly. And my goal for what's going to come when I'm finished with this will basically be Chase is going to run you guys through an interview with David to talk about what David's plan is to get going in the note business. How is he going to attack it? Now, we originally kind of bounced around an idea of just taking David and putting him into Next Gen Coastal, into the company that I operate from, and just saying, hey, here you go. Here's everything we've got. So we're going to do kind of a done-for-you version where the LLC's already started, the vendors already exist that I work with, but the relationships are what we're going to have David go and take care of on a higher level. One of the biggest things I'm going to be curious to see how he dives into is DistressedPro. We had Brecht on the show a couple weeks back, and we're really going to start digging into what is available to find out how we're best going to go about attracting new asset managers to go after new inventory. Anyone you're talking to in the space right now is always complaining about, one of three things that I keep hearing a lot. They either don't have enough money, they don't have the deals, or the deals are priced too much. There's a solution to all those things, but when you're new in the business, or maybe even if it's just your mindset, you still have some different aspects of this that you really need to go out and focus on. So ideally, Chase's interview is going to drive you guys through that with him and David, talk about what steps he's going to take to go after finding these new asset managers. And then from there, ideally, where I want to see that go, we're going to take you guys down the path of how David goes about establishing those specific relationships and how does he start reviewing deals. So I'm sure they're going to take care of all of that. Couple updates this week I want to talk to you guys about that happened in our note business that's actually going on is when last week after we left Dallas, we headed out to Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. I've got a few assets out there. And while we were out looking at some assets, we had a great trip, got to run around the Capitol for a little bit. I got a phone call from my attorney regarding a foreclosure case that was supposed to happen on Friday. And, when those calls come the day before the auction, it tends to never be good news, but we know what it is. Usually it's a bankruptcy. This was a unique case. What happened was the borrower, who was an LLC, decided to quitclaim their property to a third party. The third party then proceeded to go and file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. What's interesting is legally, everything that they did is above board. But come on, let's really think about this. You quitclaim the property that you had a legal interest to and a debt attached to an independent third party, and somehow an independent third party whom my debt is not attached to other than this transfer of title is now allowed to go file a bankruptcy, and their bankruptcy, because now they hold title to this property that's encumbered by a mortgage that our company owns, he's allowed to stay the bankruptcy. It truly blew my mind. It's another one of those things that we've seen that you just have to do enough deals to see it. Now, what are our choices? Really, we can just set and see what happens to the actual bankruptcy case. Does it get discharged through a natural course in the bankruptcy courts? We don't know how long that takes. Or we can go file a motion for relief of the stay. Well, that's probably our most expedited route to go, as opposed to just waiting for the courts to go about what they're going to do. The challenge that I have here is looking at the investment that we've made. To one of the things we talked about in Ohio, you're not able to include the legal fees into the judgment payoff figures on a foreclosure. Now, you can recoup any of your fees that are court cost of those matter, but the actual legal fees aren't recoverable in the state of Ohio. So do we spend more money to have the bankruptcy attorney at our legal firm go out and file the motion of relief? Well, I don't know. I think that's the route we're going to take because it's the quickest, but it kind of brought up a different question. What happens when you need a due on sale clause? Somebody transferred the title. It was encumbered by a mortgage with a due on sale clause. Why aren't we able to use that? Well, this week I've just been having a conversation with another investor, and they actually had a foreclosure that they had to stop. The actual complaint got removed and taken out of court because essentially they were foreclosing and continuing a foreclosure on the prior hedge funds foreclosure, and their foreclosure was based on a due on sale clause because the borrower had taken his property and transferred it from his personal name into an LLC, and then he transferred it back into his personal name. Now, a lot of what went on with that case, which we're not really going to dive too deep into, had a lot to do with the judge that was not exactly, I would say, the most intelligent, the most friendly. And I guess like what happens in a lot of these things, I really am challenged to think that these guys own any investments that are anywhere near this class or anything in the realm of it, or else they'd be a little more sympathetic and understanding to what's going on behind the scenes. Now, yes, let's back away. I do understand that judges are there to just read the law and follow the law. That's what they're supposed to do. So in the case of this one, that's exactly what's going on. It's a little bit of a headache. It costs more money. It takes more time. But I think we've talked about this enough times to know that that's what's going to happen. So quitclaim deed transferred the day before bankruptcy or the day before foreclosure. They file a bankruptcy. Now we've got to go spend more money. The other reason why this one's unique, guys, is there's a little bit of equity. So you do see the motivation for them to go fight the foreclosure, try to do something. Now, the payoff that we have right now on this one is about $40,000. If you want to get a little chuckle, the 2 weeks before the actual sale, the borrower emailed me and offered a $20,000 payoff. So you guys tell me who actually takes that deal. I don't know. We're going to sit here and just let it recoup money. I did the math on what the additional daily interest rate is compared to what we paid for it, and we're making about a 30% ROI just on that. Now, of course, it's going to be eaten up after we start paying more fees, and it will essentially disappear, but at least they'll balance out in the long run, and it's not a complete loss that we're going to get this thing drug out through the mud just a little bit farther. So, changing gears, I'm getting ready to do a little traveling this week, and one of the things I'm going to do is walk myself through the process of going to Cook County with the form to request a tax payoff. Now, a few weeks ago, I had my attorney on a larger file go do this, and I just got the bill, and I don't even want to have to admit, but I will right now, I paid for 2.5 hours of a paralegal's time so that she could get this redemption form, go down and pay it, and then come back. But also on there was 2 15-minute conversations with the partner, so it cost me about $800 to have a tax bill paid. So, ouch, it's a little expensive. We're not always going to be in Chicago. You can also mail them in. But where that goes to is not just the taxes on this one deal, because that was a unique one. But when we go and we advance taxes like that, what do you have to do and take to your servicer to get them to actually put those corporate advanced expenses onto the loan balance? Now, last week I just sent in another bill to my servicer and I got it kicked back because I did not send the original invoice along with the invoice that was marked paid, because the invoice that was marked paid is the one I set my payment with. So it's a little challenging, and all I'm going to leave you with is my next week, I will spend a little time having a conversation with my servicer to get a better understanding of what exactly they require. I, on my end, have consistently been challenged by getting the actual verification that they want on each one of these expenses. It's like a canceled check they want. Well, if I had to pay with a cashier's check to get my taxes, and I just show the payment statement from the county that shows they were paid and paid by Next Gen Coastal Investments, they want to see the canceled check. We can't show a canceled check when it's a cashier's check because it went to the county. But I can show them the receipt. Well, that doesn't matter if it's just the receipt because you could have taken the check back and cashed the check or returned it to the bank. So it's very unique. I still need to solve this problem. Obviously, it hasn't been one that's been a major problem or I would have found resolution to it already. But that's for next week. I'm going to leave you guys with that. And what's up next is going to be this interview with Chase and David. And I'm really excited about this new format. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And Chase is going to ask for it at the end of their recording, but I'm going to ask for it now. Any feedback, guys, is greatly appreciated. If you find anybody you know that you think would benefit from the material we put on this show, I'd like to tell you, I'd maybe tell 5 other people. Chase will probably ask you to tell 5 other people. And we're going to teach David to ask you to tell 5 other people.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast. That first intro bit from Robby is obviously going to throw you off. We have a brand new show almost from scratch. So it's like we're starting brand new from episode 118 and all that kind of stuff. So Robby obviously introed the show. He wanted to talk a little bit about kind of interviewing our newest co-host, as it were, David. And then he brought up a lot of really great things that I also want to talk about a little bit as well. So slightly new format, like you mentioned at the end of that little riff there. Feedback, man. Feedback is always fantastic. Let us know what your thoughts are and kind of like different ways that we can continue to grow, continue to augment the show, and continue to... 2 things I will note on the growth of the show and kind of what we're doing and what's happening. When I was in 11th grade, there was this really attractive girl that I wanted, obviously, to have fellowship with more frequently than we were having at the current time. So she was incredibly smart, which I knew, but like I didn't know, right? So she took this science class called PAG. And I was like, oh man, that sounds great. I'm decent at science. I want to go do that. So PAG stood for physiology, anatomy, genetics, and it was a college-level science class in high school. That part I did not know. So I go to take this class because I want to be, obviously, I want a lab partner, right? I want to be her lab partner. This would be great. Long story short, we were never lab partners the entire time, and I had to take this college-level science class. And I'll never forget what the teacher said the first day and just repeatedly throughout the whole course. She said, be sure to remember as the year progresses and whenever anybody asks you if they should take this class, that PAG is fun and easy and all we do is color. Which was kind of true, except not at all. And that's kind of what we're doing here, right? So we started off the year with like one of those huge... spiral notebooks, like the 5-subject one, the one that you could use like all year for like multiple different classes. Literally the whole class filled this one spiral notebook. It wasn't like, I'm not talking about 3-ring binder. I'm talking about the spiral that had like the separated like cardboard, because it was like 5-subject, right? It's this big thing. So what we would do is we would make these like, so let's say we were studying you're right, genetics and anatomy and all this kind of stuff. So let's say we were studying bones. We would get these and we would cut out all of the bones and femurs. We would color them to like help us remember. But like it was just filled with all these just copious notes and cells and diagrams, and we had to make them all ourselves. Like all of the stuff you see in regular science books out of the diagrams, we had to make all of those ourselves, right? Like to help us, remember all of these things.
So you created your own textbook.
Yeah. Yes. We created our own textbook. I've never said it that way, but that's perfect. And that's essentially what we're doing here, right? Like doing this show, doing this business. Doing notes is fun and easy, and all we do is color. Is one of the things that keeps coming to mind. And then the other is like this idea of growing pains of like, this is an interestingly disjointed show. And a lot of times you'll have these interesting, disjointed deals where like you thought it was going to go one way and now it's going this way and you're having. So I love how much life imitates art, which imitates life, which imitates art, right? In this way. So I'm really kind of pumped and excited about that. So welcome to the show, David. We're doing some new interesting things. You're a part of it, which is obviously very exciting and fantastic. And you don't actually know what the intro sounds like that Robby did. He did a 10-minute intro, and specifically he's like, I don't want him to get to listen to it ahead of time because I want it to be kind of fresh for him to get what we're trying to accomplish in this episode done. And which, by the way, probably won't happen that often, but now we'll at least get one download of this episode because you're going to want to go download it and listen to what the first 10 minutes were.
Yeah. I'm flying blind here.
Yes, he's flying blind, which is fantastic. Aren't we all? So what we have here is what we wanted to accomplish in this show is essentially interviewing you, right? To get an idea of how you're planning on growing your note business. One of the big things that we wanted to accomplish with bringing you onto the team is what you would want to accomplish bringing on any new person, right? Growth and new opportunities and kind of doubling yourself and just all of these different things that you get, right? But at the same time, you're also growing your own business. And we have a lot of people that are brand new to this space, even though we're at episode 118. This might be their first episode. And if it is, hi, how are you? Glad you're here. So we wanted to kind of interview you, and by we, I mean me, and to kind of get an idea of how you're going to be doing what it is you're going to be doing to grow your business. Now, you were a lifelong listener of the show, right? I say lifelong of the show, that is, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
When did you find the show? Like, what episode, and then you had to track back, or did you just move forward?
Let's see. Man, I reached out to you guys pretty early. Remember, I wanted to do...
It was crazy early. That's why I'm asking. I feel like it was around like episode 6 or like 7. Like it was real early.
Maybe like 10 or 12. Yeah, right around there. Pretty early.
So like Bill by Mel episode 10-ish, right? Which is kind of funny. So that's awesome. So that was very early in the shows, and you were like already like, oh, these guys are legit. They know what's up. I need to reach out to them for this thing. Right? That's great.
Well, it was a pretty big coincidence because I wanted to do a little like real estate investment expo here in Orlando, and then I found you guys. I'm like, hey, speakers, that would be great. And then that's where you set me up with Robby, and me and Robby first talked, and then we kind of loosely kept in contact, and then now like 2 years later, here we are. And
I love it. Had you actually found us at like the first episode, like in 2014, it technically would be 3 years later, though obviously if you counted the months but who's doing that? So that's awesome. That's fantastic. So as somebody who has listened to the show for a really long time, but hasn't dove extremely deep, right? Like jumped off the deep end into the note space. Right. You're in a really unique setting, right? Like you're in the place where a lot of new people that come to the show are. And so that's what makes this so fantastic and a really interesting opportunity to figure out what you're going to do differently than we did, or what you might have learned from the show, anything, right? Like a lot of those types of things. So first things first, right behind you, for those that are watching over on YouTube, we're trying to do a lot of new interesting things, and we'll talk about that later in the show, but we've got video happening here. So you've got, obviously first things first, what are you doing to grow your business? And right behind you is the whiteboard with the goals. I love that. Were you as hardcore a goal setter prior to listening to the show? Were you like a Robby, or were you like a me?
I don't want to say I was like you. I mean,
Whoa! Listen.
there's nothing wrong with like what you were doing, but I wasn't like either of you guys. I wasn't goal setting hard enough. Like I think like most people, I was goal setting in my head and being like, yeah, it'd be nice to get there, or it'd be really cool to do this thing. But I was not writing it down and looking at it every day saying, this is where I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to get. So in that sense, no, I wasn't really a goal setter.
Right.
But now I am. So
very nice, very good. So right off the top for you, was that kind of the first thing, for you, aside from, I mean, obviously you're not coming from nowhere, right? You do have the contacts that some of the contacts that we have and a lot of those types of things, right? So you're not technically starting from square one, but for anybody who's listening to the show for any decent amount of time, you're not starting out that much further ahead.
No,
I assume, because a lot of the deal connection, or should I say, like hedge funds or banks or whatever that we're dealing with, we've talked about on the show. We've interviewed a bunch of them on the show, and a lot of the different things that we've talked about are things that the things that you have ahead of other people. If you're taking good enough notes, you're like 5 yards down the field, and they're like 4 yards down the field.
Yeah. And I forget the analogy, but it's something like, there's only so much you can learn by studying a book. There's like a lot more to learn by like experience.
Sure. Unless you're making your own book, like I had to do in PAG. Which is essentially what we're going to have you do,
Yeah. Well, I'd love to make some sort of textbook for myself to look back and study with. Yeah.
That would be the goal, right?
Just like, they're lurkers like me, they did some courses, they learned some stuff, they researched some topics and lingo, and I think I know some stuff, but this is where actually when I was in Texas and we all were together, I was a little intimidated because there were like terms and things I didn't know. I was like, wow, maybe I don't know as much as I thought I knew. But
listening on conversations, like that's why we talk so much about networking, right? Like,
right.
Okay, so before I get too deep into it, let's talk about your plan. What are some of the things, what have you, and this is something that I'm sure you have worked out a little bit with Robby, but hopefully not too much, or else this completely sabotages the point of the show. But no. What are some of the things that you're going to be doing to get started, to get your note business rolling? Obviously, certain things that we've talked about in the past that kind of hits you a little bit ahead is the LLC. You technically already have one set up for your own real estate business, but you're also going to be operating a little bit out of Next Gen Coastal. And like we mentioned, some of the contacts. But what are some of the things that you're going to be starting? How are you going to be aggressively attacking this business? For anybody that is new, that is listening, what are some of the things you're going to be doing? Walk us through that process.
Okay. Some things I'm going to be doing, like you said, setting up like maybe a new LLC, not immediately, but for now, working under Robby's company, Next Gen Coastal. And then he's going to be, from what we've spoken about so far, he's going to give me some of his deals to kind of work with and learn the process while he works with me in the business, kind of teaching me.
Yeah.
And then once we reach a certain point where like we're both comfortable of where I'm at as far as notes and learning how to, call the counties and talk to borrowers or any of that kind of stuff. Then we're going to work together on building systems and systematizing like each other's businesses. Because like you said, I'll be growing my own business inside of Robby's, and we're just going to be helping each other grow systems so we can both get to that point in that lifestyle that we want to get to.
Sure. But like granularly, like what are some of the things that you're going to start working on?
So granularly, we're going to be working on due diligence and just learning the whole process as far as as far as what's good due diligence and what's bad due diligence. Some vendor setup, learning how to reach out to like new vendors and I guess people that sell notes and maybe even doing some cold calling to see if I can talk to some new asset managers because I come from traditional real estate where cold calling and door knocking is a big thing. So I'm pretty comfortable in that space as far as just picking up the phone and making those calls. So that's something I'm excited about.
And one of the things that we had talked about and that you're working on, obviously we just had Brecht Palumbo on the show, and you're really diving heavy into DistressedPro. I mean, that's why we had him on the show. We wanted him to come in, talk a little bit about what they had going on, and we're diving in pretty aggressively. Both Robby and myself, as well as definitely having you kind of go in and almost knock down some of those kind of going with the machete and like, okay guys, which is us kind of doubling ourselves a little bit, right? Like that's the point, right? And then you get this really awesome opportunity to come in and do those things. So being more comfortable with I don't think you were with, were you under an umbrella? Who were you with when you had your brokerage? Who was your broker?
It was La Rosa Realty. It's a big company here in Florida, but they're starting to branch out to other states.
Did you have something like, I was really familiar because of my mortgage background. I worked a lot with a bunch of different Keller Williams agents. Did y'all have something similar to like the Power Hour? Did y'all have that?
Yeah. I mean, they have like prospecting groups where everybody sits down and just makes calls.
Yeah. So that's what they called it in that. I'm sure other organizations have something similar or literally that thing, but they had that like Power Hour where you like just hammer away, right, for whatever it was. You come from a background of essentially having to do that, which is really great. So the combo of the DistressedPro and the lack of fear, a little bit, right? Like you want to make sure you get the terms right and everything right before you make too many calls. But that general lack of fear, I think, is going to be a pretty fantastic combination.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. And I think you and Robby both know I've texted you guys. I'm like, wow, this is a powerful software. I'm excited to learn it. And it's cool because they got videos and stuff on there too. And this is not sponsored by DistressedPro, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But it's cool because they got videos and kind of some scripts that you can kind of touch on. And I'm just excited to see how that works because, that's all about constantly doing that. So, we'll see in the next coming episodes how that works out.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Interestingly enough, I'm going to be doing all that kind of stuff and this setting up of vendors and LLC and due diligence all overseas in the next coming weeks. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's funny the parallels between a lot of what we're still keeping with the show. So now I feel like I'm slightly outnumbered, right? Because now we have like two lifestyle, travel design guys, and I'm the stay-at-home dad or staying local kind of guy, which is great. But it helps to obviously continue to push the agenda, right, that we have, that essentially you do get a lot more freedom and flexibility with something like this over a lot of other different strategies. And more specifically, though, I think that having those systems or thinking about it with that systems mindset, there's a lot of different things that you could do and have that lifestyle that you want if you're operating that way, if that makes sense. Like you're able to do that. And be able to do that, right? Like, so I think that's really neat. I think that's really cool to be able to do that. And so, again, that's kind of why we talk so much about systems. It's not just so much about like having our business be easy or whatever the case is, but it's also being able to do the things we want to do and having everything set in such a way that like if we need to remove ourselves for 2 days to just like, or in your case for multiple weeks to go travel to Barcelona and Spain and have a good time there. Whatever it is, you can do those things, right? And to the point that you can literally run a ton of what it is that is your business from afar, which is really cool and fantastic. So that's why it's such a big component, though I definitely feel slightly, outnumbered, which is fantastic.
It's okay. You're just bringing us lifestyle from a different perspective.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to be interested in hearing more from when Robby had the intro, he was talking about, like some tax stuff that was happening. We're going to be bringing you guys a lot more information regarding like getting that tax situation in order, getting, reduced taxes, all these kinds of things. But also he talked about that strategy, or I say strategy from the borrower's perspective of right at the end of a deal, quit claiming the deed to someone who had nothing to do with the deal so that way they could refile bankruptcy. That to me it's diabolical at a level that like if it's not your deal, you're like, man, I can totally appreciate how ridiculous that is, like ridiculously diabolical. And if it is your deal, you're beyond annoyed. Like,
well, I was at the call. I was in the car when Robby had that call, and it was just after the call, we just couldn't understand how it was legally possible. Like you'd think the law would prevent something that can happen over and over again, but when you look at it, what's stopping them from quitclaiming over and over again to keep this thing going? Because it wasn't to a family member; it was just to a random person.
Yeah.
So,
it's so you know what immediately stops you. The obvious answer is not everybody is super pumped about filing bankruptcy, right? Like somebody comes to me and they're like, "Hey, bro, like I really want to keep my house, but like I can't file bankruptcy anymore. Can I quit claim this to you so you file bankruptcy?" I'd be like, no, thank you, sir." Right. So like I think there's obviously a limit. There is a ceiling on the number of people who are going to be willing to bankrupt on paper themselves for you to stay in your house. So I don't know if this person literally has nothing to do with it. I think potentially there's got to be some connection outside. Yeah. I mean, clearly to be comfortable enough with someone to ask them to file bankruptcy for you or for themselves to, so there's got to be something happening there. No question. But still just a bonkers, this is legal thing. Like that is unbelievable to me.
It's strange because the attorney's just like, yeah, it's completely legal, and we're like, well, is it like unethical or something? Like, could you take it to the ethics board? It's just like nothing they did was unethical. I'm just like, what do you mean?
Everything. From the perspective of somebody who actually everything that So listen, like I said, it's one of those things where it's not exactly like this. Again, it's our deal. It's the deal we have. So it's like I'm not going to say like, oh, good on you. No question. I'm not happy about it at all. But I used to play tennis for a long time, and I was a really high level tennis player. And I don't know if you're familiar if you play tennis, but one of the things that would happen is if you're in like this long rally with somebody, which is just you guys are hitting the ball back and forth, and the opponent or yourself, you hit a ball and it hits the tape, which is that part of the net that's like right at the top, and it just happens to go over. And every time, it's like a rule, right? It's like baseball's got a ton of unwritten rules. Unwritten rule in tennis is you like wave. Like you're like, oh, like I'm glad it went my way, but like, sorry, it ended. So, you know what I mean? Like that's what it feels like to me, being on the receiving end of like this. Oh, you guys got it right over the tape, you sons of... Like, I feel like that's that feeling of being on the receiving end of, like, I'm doing everything I can to win this point, to win this match, right?
It's cheap. It wasn't justified. Or it wasn't satisfying.
Yeah. It's just this, like, oh... Like, they just eked this thing out that happens... It's in the rules. It can hit the tape and go over. But dang it, we were, so it feels just so draining to like put everything you have into this one and then be like, and then you're like, all right, let's go back to the line. Let's serve it up again. Let's see what they got this time. That's what this feels like to me. And it's almost exhausting because you just went through all of this back and forth to then have them win this round, right? Like that way. Brutal. It's brutal. And again, it's one of those things where when we bring this stuff to the show, it's to help you know, hey, if you're in this state, this is what you can look for. If you're in this county, this is what you can look for. If you're in this, that is something that can happen. So, be aware that hopefully no one gets hip to it. Hopefully they don't start selling this as like a course to potential foreclosed buyers or something like that. Here's $9.99. Here you can get this. That would be and I think the ceiling is pretty low on the number of people who are willing to file bankruptcy for somebody else.
Right.
But still,
possibility out there,
Yeah, I mean, even if it's like 5 times or 4 times or 2 times, 1 time was annoying enough. Like, good Lord, it's so annoying. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. One of the last things I wanted to talk about was some of the upgrades we're going to be bringing to the community, bringing to the show, and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to touch base on any of that regarding, say, video or different things that are going to be coming down the pipe? I tasked you with a thing. As like all right, man, you're part of the team. Like this is and I know that Robby's probably tasked you like this is how we work, right? This is how we operate.
Well, this is perfect because it's like a checks and balances. So
Yeah.
don't worry, I'm gonna task you two and task Robby, and we're all gonna task each other.
That's the big thing. Like it's an accountability thing, right? Like so again, it's just these like you said, checks and balances, whatever the case may be. But some of the upgrades we'll be bringing to the show.
So some of the upgrades, better audio.
Yeah.
Not that it's bad, but it's just gonna get better. So that's awesome. And then more of those life, like day in the life type videos, because I found those really fun when you guys did them. And I have a little hobby for video editing, and soon enough I'll have a drone so we can take some awesome shots of like assets from above and stuff. So yeah, I'm really stoked for just making little videos that we can throw up on YouTube.
Yeah. What's great about those is that there's a component, right, to the lifestyle bit, but then there's also, it's almost like they're like mini podcast episodes, right? Because then it's, here's what's happening in the business, here's what might be happening, and it's from just a bonkers amount of angles, right? Because you might have just gotten off the phone with so-and-so regarding this asset that might have never made it to the show because it wasn't super significant, or it wasn't significant enough to carry with you, right? To like throw in your bag to then carry to the next recording. You know what I mean? But it was an interesting thing where you're like, all right, we're out here working on this, we're doing this. Oh, and I just got off the phone with an attorney and we're talking about XYZ, right? Like these types of things are fascinating things to kind of bring to the show. Getting a drone, listen, I'm already jelly a little bit. I'm a huge fan of, and I certainly do not have one. Except I do so much little asset travel, as like you'll be doing a ton of asset travel. So it would just be me, like, just like with a drone over my head, just like, hey guys, I got a drone. It really wouldn't be that exciting. You recently got to go look at a bunch of assets. In DC, Baltimore specifically. Obviously, you mentioned being down in Texas and how much you love Texas. I know it's just the greatest state in the union. But up in Baltimore, how was that? What was that like? What was what did you guys see up there?
I'll preface it this way. It was some of the most exhausting travel days I've had in a long time, but super rewarding. Just because, man, we walked into a couple assets. From the outside, they look like great deals, especially for the numbers we were talking. I don't remember off the top of my head, but something like buying something for 60, fixing it up and being able to sell it for like 400. But man, you walked into that, it was like a crack house. I mean, there were syringes in there, there were spoons. Half the back was like falling and sloping off because I think it was like missing a retaining wall. Man, that thing had to be completely scrapped and build a new house. And then when you thought about it that way, the margins were just so slim that it wouldn't work. But for somebody that isn't buying them, seeing the houses physically, you would never know, and you'd be screwed on that deal. But it was just a really cool experience. We went to some other ones that were just actually really decent neighborhoods, and you could see through the windows and it looked like the houses weren't too bad. So just being able to have that perspective instead of just relying on internet or paper due diligence was really great.
So as an agent, right, because you still have your license, right?
Right.
And I don't know if we've ever had an agent on the show.
Hey.
So kind of now we'll have one all the time. But like, so as an agent, I mean, like that's a really important part of the due diligence process. Or at the very least, it should be regarding having your team, growing your team, doing all those kinds of things, right? What would you say is... How do you get a relationship with an agent that would potentially be able to find those things out for you better than not, right? Like making the phone calls, like explaining, like, and this might not be an answer that you can actually answer, right? And I mean that because you get it, right? Like... If an agent doesn't get it, then you know what I mean?
That's a good question. And I think me and Robby touched on this while we were driving back and forth between Baltimore and DC. But any agent or even any agent that you hire, I think has to have done some sort of work in that realm that you're buying in. So if it's a rental, you want to use an agent that has rentals or has worked with rentals, or like a property manager. somebody that's going to be like a flip, you want an agent that's like either flip specific or has done lots of flips themselves. And I mean, don't be afraid to go and ask them for before and after pictures of their work and stuff like that. Because I think having somebody that knows that space really is going to know what to look for. Because me going out there, I've done flips before, and I still kind of do flips. So I know how to, do a scope of work and price out floors and walls and materials and all that kind of stuff. So it helps going out there and for me to see it physically. But if you're contracting out, just having somebody that knows any space you're going to get into would be really useful.
Oh, incredibly. That's why, I mean, that's the whole game, right? At that point, which is infinitely fascinating to me to be like, oh my gosh, like this is so fantastic having, you know what I mean? Like, oh, this is wonderful. Now we've added such a, and luckily we've already agreed on your pay. So no, I'm just kidding. But like essentially, like that's a really important thing when it comes to building your team or knowing what you're looking at. And we've talked ad nauseum about, even if you're in a situation like myself, I've been out traveling and looking at assets. I actually looked at assets out in DC. Also, these were all commercial stuff. But like, even if you're in a place where travel is difficult, it means that you need to work even harder at the asset side of it, right? Like finding the assets and all, or the team building side of it, and getting out as often as you possibly can.
And I don't know if this is common sense, but, just like you do due diligence on the asset, you have to do due diligence on the team members that you're bringing on. So like the contractors and the agents and all of that kind of stuff. You want to do your research on them too. So it just comes back to, getting, be it, reviews or references on these people just to make sure they're legit. So you're not wasting your time when you do go out there. Because I can tell you, we went out there to one of the Baltimore properties, and luckily the agent that we met up with at one of them brought like a contractor and another guy, but the agent was like, and I don't know if he listens or not, but he wasn't helpful in any way, to the point where he's like, oh, I know the guy down the street, he has some cool cars, I'll be right back, and he just walked off while we were talking, and that was kind of odd. So
really?
Yeah.
That is fascinating.
Thankfully, the contractor was an agent himself, and he kind of knew what he was talking about, so that didn't waste our time completely. But that just weird stuff like that happens, and you want to minimize.
Hey, they're selling Girl Scout cookies outside. I'm going to pause the show. I'm going to come back. That is bonkers.
Yeah.
I can't keep my attention longer than 5 minutes. I'm sorry. I'm going to go look at these cool cars. Dang, that's legit. That's important. And lastly, I would say is a really interesting part about having, say, a good website setup, a good online presence, and all that kind of stuff, because they should equally be doing due diligence for you, like against you, right? You call them up randomly. Hey, this is Chase. I needed this. You can find out some of the deals I do over on my website. You can go check me out here. You can do this. You can do this, and then they can look back and go, oh, this isn't just some fly-by-night guy. This is somebody who's legitimately doing this business, who's legitimately getting after it and all that kind of stuff. Because if you're doing due diligence on these people, you can absolutely expect and should expect them to equally be doing it for you, right? So that's also incredibly important to be doing. So, any parting shots for the people?
No, nothing really. Just hope everybody has a good week.
Delightful. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed that. We'll be bringing you a ton more information as we get it, right, regarding things like DistressedPro, what's happening with the tax situation, obviously what's up with that BK quitclaim situation and all that kind of stuff, as well as numerous other deals. All kinds of really cool stuff that's going on. We'll be keeping you abreast of all of that stuff as it happens. New videos. If you have not already, you're going to want to go over to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed over there, because there's going to be a ton of content that only is housed there. Like it won't ever make it to the show, which is very cool. So you'll get double the fun. It'll be great. And it will.
Here's a little teaser too. This is just more because I'm saying it out loud on the podcast, and so hopefully everybody can keep me accountable. I'll be in Europe in the next couple of weeks, and I told you maybe I'll dabble in learning what notes are like internationally. I don't know. I have no idea what that space is even like, but I want to do some research and maybe even just bring on, hey, this is what I learned about international notes. So
yeah, or just real estate in general. If you see a loft in Barcelona, Madrid, just take a look, see what the pricing looks like, give us an idea. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you being here. If this is your first time here, be sure to head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and of course, subscribe. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you better have already subscribed. Hit us with a like all over the screen, right? You can find everything we talked about in the show notes over at NoteMBA.com. And of course, as always, Robby already mentioned it, but be sure to tell 5 other people you know about the Note MBA podcast. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks for listening.